Jaws is rightfully called the greatest shark movie ever made by pretty much everyone that knows movies. And for good reason, but when it comes to other movies in the genre, you'll find out pretty quickly that for the most part, shark movies don't really get as good as that 1975 classic. Like, ever. Even the Jaws sequels themselves fell into loads of criticism once they came out. But there was one movie that kind of escaped that curse. And back in 1999, it rose to the top of a new genre of horror films that had taken over the decade completely. Deep Blue Sea is a 1999 shark thriller directed by Renny Harlin. It stars Thomas Jane, Samuel L. Jackson, LL Cool J, and Saffron Burrows. The movie revolves around an aquatic research base where scientists are hard at work on trying to experiment with sharks in order to cure Alzheimer's. Since the sharks have a protein that would help fix this terrible disease, the scientists go about making the sharks' brains bigger in order to mine more of it. And that goes about as well as you could expect. Now, if you've been watching my channel before in the past, you'll already know that we are way on top of 1999 over here. Animal attack movies were all the rage back then, and reviews of Lake Placid, King Cobra, Komodo, and even bats have already been done on the channel. After the massive success of movies like Jurassic Park and The Lost World, a whole new genre of this stuff got kicked off in the 90s, and that year was chock full of those kinds of thrillers. This one, though, in my own personal opinion, is probably the best of those kinds of movies that came out that year, and there's honestly a lot of reasons I say that. For starters, Deep Blue Sea is a really fun movie, and the characters that exist within the film are not only entertaining to watch, but they have a level of believability and relatability that I've always thought goes a long way. The character of Susan, her motivation to experiment on the sharks stems from her own father falling victim to Alzheimer's. So she's got a pretty good purpose to be so caught up in what they're doing there at the aquatic base. Thomas Jane does a great job as the resident badass of the group, and Samuel L. Jackson has kind of a secret survivalist story all his own. But the real champion of the movie has to be, without a shadow of a doubt, Preacher, played by LL Cool J, who has always been my favorite character of the movie, and he is by far the most likable and memorable dude Deep Blue Sea has to offer.
You ate my bird.
The backstory into how this thing got made centers around the screenwriter witnessing a shark attack in real life and later on suffering nightmares of himself trying to evade the animals in dark passageways and corridors where, get this, the sharks could read his mind. Pretty crazy stuff, you ask me, but also the foundation for a really entertaining thrill ride. The script was sold back in 1994 but didn't come out as a finished product until the summer of '99, where it made around $165 million on a $60 to $80 million budget. A sleeper hit, I guess, but still pretty successful in its own right as far as I'm concerned, which is probably why this film is considered by many to be the only real runner-up to Jaws. Speaking of Jaws, you'll find out pretty early on that this movie has loads of little references to it, with a tiger shark eating a license plate in a similar way that goes down in the 1975 film. Also, I don't know if this is true or not, but the way in which all of the sharks die, that seems to have been inspired by the ways the sharks die in the first 3 Jaws movies, only in reverse order. One gets blown up, one gets electrocuted, and then one gets really blown up. But hey, who knows, maybe that's just a coincidence. Actually, I take that back, there's no such thing.
If this is a lesson about the drinking, let's just say I've learned.
There's so many great little scenes in this thing that I think carve a name out for itself and make it the cult classic that it's become. Preacher's little parrot spouting off profanity, LL Cool J's faith in God leading the crew to safety, the blend of pop culture science with a wily Jurassic Park atmosphere, and the set piece where Skarsgård gets thrown through a sheet of glass, also similar to a scene from Jaws 3D. They're all uber memorable parts of this movie. I'm not going to spoil the most famous scene though, in case some of you haven't seen it. But let's just say there's a gigantic surprise death that everyone remembers from Deep Blue Sea, and the less you know about it, the more effective it happens to be. One other element that you may find to be interesting about the movie is the fact that its ending was actually changed at the last minute. Apparently, less than a month before Deep Blue Sea came out, a test audience saw the film and absolutely hated the fact that Saffron Burrows' character lived, because she'd been responsible for the experimentation that went down on the Mako Sharks. And because of this, the production crew went back out for a single day and shot an entire, alternate scene where she gets ripped in half by the last Mako Shark as a sacrifice for Thomas Jane and LL Cool J to get out of the movie alive. Spoiler alert, by the way.
They'll have to find a way to save their own.
Renny Harlin, who remember has directed other big movies like Cliffhanger, Die Hard 2, and A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, he even says that this is what may have helped save the film, because people were all on board loving it up until the last, 7 minutes where Susan lives. The test cards for feedback from what the director has said basically read, "Kill the bitch," and so they went back and reshot that ending, and the rest is movie history.
Tell me what that is.
Now personally, I don't think this is exactly one of the greatest movies ever made, but it definitely is one of the greatest animal attack movies of the 1990s. It's hard to go up against stuff like Jurassic Park, but oddly enough, this film wound up being so memorable that when Jurassic World came out in 2015, several people noted that it felt like that sequel may have had many moments inspired by Deep Blue Sea, with Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard's characters viewed as being pretty similar to the relationship between Saffron Burrows and Thomas Jane. I don't know how true it is, if there was inspiration there, but I will admit, if this was raptors instead of sharks, yeah, it's kinda Jurassic World. Whatever the case may be, Deep Blue Sea is a pretty great little gem from the late 90s that I think most people have fond memories of. I can remember when it came out fondly. That VHS tape was really scary to kids like myself back in the day, and we all loved it for that. All of these characters feel pretty genuine, and the special effects that were used in the movie come off as pretty realistic when they're not CGI, which unfortunately hasn't really held up as well as some of the animatronic work, but what is in the movie does work well enough for what it is, and that's good enough for monster movie fans like myself.
Faith in Walt Conte, who built Free Willy and Anaconda.
It was followed up by a few direct-to-video sequels, the first of which is the only one I've seen so far. I'll never forget being in my little apartment living on my own for the first time, riding high on the hype of where the next Jurassic World movie would go in 2018. And my dad walked in with Deep Blue Sea 2. Oh, his enthusiasm was through the roof, but after Lake Placid 2, I sadly knew better. Anyways, guys, those are all just my own thoughts on this fun little shark movie from 1999, but what do you think? What are your own thoughts on the film, and have you even seen it? Personally, like I said, I think it's the king of the animal attack movies that came out that year, but hey, whatever your own thoughts and opinions happen to be on Deep Blue Sea, I'd love to hear them in the comments down below.
Deepest blue